I want you to understand something about the word patience. Not the patience of waiting in line. Not the patience of sitting in traffic or holding for customer service or watching a slow download bar crawl across a screen. The patience of standing at the back of a room you built, a room named after your dead best friend, filled with people you hired, inside a building you designed, and watching a man you mentored, a man married to your daughter, a man who sat at your kitchen table 12 years ago and told you he wanted to make you proud. Standing at the front of that room, describing your retirement to your own employees, without ever asking you. I want you to understand what that kind of patience costs, what it requires, what it means to stand completely still while something like that is happening and choose, deliberately, consciously, with everything you have, not to move yet. Because the yet is everything. My name is Gerald Whitmore. I am 68 years old. I built a company from $11,000 and a folding table in 1991. And on a Tuesday afternoon in March, I stood at the back of my own conference room and gave a man enough rope to finish what he had started. He finished it. Then I walked to the front. Welcome back to the channel. Grab your coffee, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every opportunity to play it straight. They had every chance to walk away clean. They just chose the hard way. Drop a comment to let us know where you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe. You're going to enjoy this one. The building at 4400 Meridian Drive in Columbus, Ohio has my name on it. Not literally, I am not the kind of man who puts his name on buildings. But it has my decisions in it. Every hallway, every office configuration, every window placement was something I thought about and chose. I signed the construction contract in 2004, during the years when the company had grown large enough to need its own space and I had finally allowed myself to believe it would last. In the lobby there is an oak tree. Not a real one, a sculptural installation, commissioned from a local artist, based on the tree that Richard Holt planted in the courtyard on the day we moved in. Richard died in 2003. The tree in the courtyard is 30 years old now. The sculpture in the lobby is the reason visitors stop when they walk in, before they know what it means. Every new employee learns what it means during their first week. That was my requirement, not in a policy document, just an expectation that the people who ran orientation understood and maintained. You learn about the tree. You learn about Richard. You learn that this company was built by two people and that one of them is gone and the other one comes in every morning through the front door and looks at that sculpture and remembers what it cost to be here. This is the building Marcus Hale decided to stage his announcement in. I will give him credit for one thing, he chose a room with weight. Whether he understood the weight or simply appreciated the optics, I cannot say with certainty. What I can say is that a man who understood what that room contained would not have done what he did inside it. Marcus came to us in 2017. Married to my daughter Claire, who is the sharpest person I have ever met and who chose him with the precision she applies to everything, carefully, deliberately, after significant consideration. I trusted her judgment. I still do. What she chose was a genuinely capable man who had one flaw significant enough to eventually override the capability. Marcus Hale could not be in someone else's story. He could participate in it, contribute to it, improve it, but eventually, inevitably, he would need to make it his own. Not from malice. From the particular hunger of a talented person who has always worked in borrowed rooms. I understand this hunger. I had it myself, once. The difference is that I built my own room rather than renovating someone else's while they were still inside it. I have attended hundreds of board meetings in 31 years. I have run most of them. I have a particular way of preparing, agenda reviewed the night before, key questions written in the margins, a clear sense of what I want to accomplish and what I am willing to concede. The February board meeting was the first one in 31 years for which I was not prepared. Because it was the first one in 31 years that Marcus had loaded without telling me. He presented a governance restructuring proposal. Professionally done, Marcus is always professionally done. He had slides, he had data, he had the language of institutional evolution and operational scalability that sounds like progress until you translate it into plain terms. In plain terms, he wanted to remove the practical authority of the chairman role while preserving the title. He wanted to bring in an external chief strategy officer, someone he had already identified, though he did not say this, who would report to him rather than to the board. He wanted, in essence, to complete the transition from Gerald Whitmore's company to Marcus Hale's company while Gerald Whitmore was still in the building. I asked 3 questions. Calm, specific, technical questions about the governance process and the documentation. The third question, about the CSO hire, produced a pause that told me everything. I closed the meeting without a vote. I called my lawyer from the parking garage. Her name is Deb Schaefer. 22 years. She is precise, relentless, and constitutionally incapable of softening bad news, which is why I have kept her for 2 decades. She spent 2 weeks pulling threads. What she found was not a smoking gun. It was a pattern, small governance moves, each individually defensible, that collectively pointed in one direction. Marcus had been preparing this for at least 18 months. He had found a provision in the 2019 governance restructuring, a document I had signed without focusing on one particular clause, that gave the president the ability to propose officer authority amendments without chairman consent. I had signed the document that made this possible. This is the thing I have sat with most in the months since. Not his ambition, I understand ambition. My own inattention. My own assumption that the foundation was secure enough that I did not need to keep checking it. Richard Holt would have caught that clause in 2019. He would have read it twice and called me and said, "Gerald. This one." Richard has been gone for 21 years. I had not found his replacement. That was my failure. Everything else was Marcus's. If you have ever watched someone use your own trust against you, hit the like button. You already know what walking to the front of that room felt like. The spring all-hands at Whitmore Project Solutions is a tradition I began in the early years when the company was small enough that everyone fit in one room and the gathering felt like family. As the company grew, the tradition grew with it, bigger room, satellite feeds to other offices, a program that had developed its own rhythms over 30 years. Marcus had taken over running it 2 years prior. I had allowed this because allowing it was the correct transitional behavior of a chairman who believes in succession. What I had not accounted for was the possibility that the all-hands would become the venue for announcing a succession I had not agreed to. The agenda showed a segment called Leadership Evolution, scheduled for the midpoint of the program. I knew what it was. I confirmed attendance without requesting agenda time. I told his assistant I would simply be there in support. Marcus texted me, "Great, Dad. Looking forward to having you there. Dad." I put my phone down. I got dressed. The suit from Richard's funeral, not theater, but association. The clothes I wear when things matter. Eleanor adjusted my tie the way she has for 40 years and said, "Are you sure?" I said. He chose the room. I arrived early. I walked through the conference hall before it filled. Past the chairs, past the stage, past 200 people's worth of empty seats. I found my position at the back corner, near the door, and I stayed there. The program was good. Marcus is excellent at this. The room was with him from the first minute. The year's results were strong. The new contract win generated genuine pride from the floor. These were my people. I could feel the warmth between them and him, and I recognized it as real because I had spent 30 years building the culture that made that warmth possible. Then he got to leadership evolution. He built to it carefully. The company's growth. The responsibilities of scale. The need for governance that matches where the company is going rather than where it has been. He spoke about bringing in new strategic leadership. He spoke about the importance of honoring legacy while embracing the future. And then he turned slightly toward the back of the room. He looked at me. And he said that in recognition of the incredible legacy that had brought us here, the chairman role would be transitioning to an emeritus position. That Gerald Whitmore would always be the heart of what we built. That it was time for him to step into a well-earned and fully honored retirement. He started to clap. The room, taking its cue, began to clap with him. I stood at the back and I let him finish. I let the applause run its full course. I let the moment breathe exactly as long as he needed it to, because the longer it breathed, the more complete the performance became, and a performance needs to be complete before you can respond to the whole thing rather than interrupting the middle of it. He finished. I walked to the front. I did not go to the podium. I stood beside it. Small choice, significant meaning, his podium, his setup, his program. I didn't need any of it. I said, "Thank you, Marcus." Warmly. I meant it in the way you mean thank you to someone who has just shown you something true about themselves that you needed to see. Then I turned to the room. 200 people, people I had hired, people whose names I knew, people whose children I had watched grow up in the company's family events over 30 years. Tom Reeves in the third row, retired but present because he still loved the place. Patricia Huang near the window. Dave Kowalski in the back left, the man who had run my operations for 16 years before Marcus moved him sideways. These were not Marcus's people. They were the company's people. There is a difference. I said, I started this company in a garage in 1991 with $11,000 and a folding table. Most of you know that story. I won't tell it again today. A laugh. Warm. Real. What I will tell you is something that has never been announced at one of these all-hands. Because it has never been relevant until today. I paused. Not for drama, for clarity. I own 61% of this company. 200 people went absolute. The operating agreement requires a 65% shareholder majority to approve any amendment to officer authorities. This has always been the case. It was affirmed in the 2019 governance restructuring, which I have reviewed carefully with counsel. I looked at Marcus. His composure had not broken. But something behind his eyes had moved. The announcement you just heard has not been approved by the board. It has not been put to a shareholder vote. Under the terms of the operating agreement, it cannot be implemented without my consent. I have not given my consent. 3 seconds of silence. I am not retiring. I am not transitioning to an emeritus role. The restructuring proposal will be withdrawn, not by me, but because Marcus is going to withdraw it. Because Marcus is a smart man who understands what the alternative looks like. I looked at him. He said, quietly, Gerald. I said, this is the room you chose. These are the people you chose to be in it. If you have something to say to me, this is the moment. He didn't say anything. I turned back to the room. The numbers Marcus showed you this morning are real. The growth is real. The work you have done is extraordinary, and I am proud of every person in this building. I meant that completely. Every word. This company has a future. I intend to make sure it is built on the same foundation it has always stood on. Honesty. Accountability. And the understanding that the people doing the work are the company. Not the org chart. Not the titles. The people. I walked back to the corner. Someone in the middle row started clapping. Then another. Then the room, not the room following a cue this time, but 200 people deciding something together. The sound was different from the earlier applause. You can hear the difference when you have been in enough rooms. I stood at the back and I let it happen. If that number, 61%, gave you the same feeling it gave that room, subscribe right now. We have more stories where that came from. Marcus found me between cars and the parking structure afterward. Fluorescent lights. Concrete. Not the backdrop either of us would have chosen. He was controlled. Whatever he was carrying underneath, and I believe it was considerable, the surface held. It is one of his genuine skills and, I now understand, one of the things that made him dangerous. A person who can keep the surface composed under pressure can also keep other things below the surface for a very long time. He said, that was not how I wanted this to go. I said, I know. I was trying to do what was best for the company. I looked at him for a long moment. Marcus. I've thought carefully about how much of what you did was about the company and how much was about yourself. I don't have a clean answer. But I want to tell you something that I need you to actually hear. He waited. You are talented. The results from the past 3 years are real. If you had come to me, sat across from me the way you sat across from me at my kitchen table 12 years ago and told me what you needed, I would have listened. I would have found a path. His jaw shifted. Instead you chose the hallway. The route that didn't require the conversation. And I need you to understand what that cost you, not as punishment from me, but as information about yourself. Because you will make this choice again, Marcus, unless you look at it directly. He was quiet. Then, are you firing me? I said, that depends on what you do next. The hardest part was Claire. She called that evening from Chicago, where she had watched the All Hands on satellite feed. Her voice was careful in the way it gets when she is managing something large. She said, Dad. Tell me your version. I told her everything. She was quiet for a long time after. Then she said, he didn't tell me. What didn't he tell you? Any of it. The board proposal. The all hands plan. He told me it was routine governance. I had assumed Claire knew. The possibility that Marcus had kept her uninformed reframed everything slightly, not the act itself, but its shape. A man who will deceive the board and the founder will also deceive his wife. The compartmentalization was not strategic. It was habitual. She said, I keep thinking about how you never played it safe. Not once. You always chose the hard true thing over the easy comfortable thing. And it's so hard to watch someone try to make you into a comfortable thing to be managed. I said, your mother raised you well. She said, you both did. Stay with this next part. The resolution is the reason this story matters more than the confrontation. Marcus withdrew the restructuring proposal 10 days later. On his own, before any formal board action. A memo to the board citing the need for stakeholder alignment. Professional language for, I miscalculated. We had 3 conversations in the following 2 weeks. In my study. He came to me each time. What emerged, slowly, uncomfortably, was something more complicated than a power grab. Marcus had been operating from a fear he had never named, that he would always be the son-in-law in a founder's company. That no matter what he built or grew, the story would always be Gerald Whitmore's story. That the employees, when they looked at him, saw Claire's husband rather than the man running the company. This fear was not entirely wrong. I had not been deliberate enough about transferring credit. About ensuring that wins were visibly attributed to his leadership. I had continued attending all hands as a presence that, however benign, reminded every room that the founder was still in the building. I do not say this to excuse what he did. The board maneuver was wrong. The all-hands announcement was a unilateral power move disguised as institutional progress. These things are not made acceptable by the fear underneath them. But the fear was real. And understanding the fear changed what the resolution needed to look like. We built an agreement. Marcus retained the president role with defined, documented authority. I retained the chairman role with specific responsibilities rather than ambient presence. A new independent board member, appointed by neither of us, was brought in to provide perspective we had both been missing. And we scheduled lunch. Monthly. The way we used to. The first one was awkward. The second was better. By the third we were talking about the company the way we had at my kitchen table in 2017, when he was still just a man trying to understand what I had built. I don't know what the fourth will look like. It is on the calendar. I am 68 years old. I have made most of the mistakes available to a man who builds things. Too controlling and not controlling enough, sometimes in the same week. Trusting too quickly and too slowly, often the wrong people in both directions. What this taught me, genuinely taught me, not confirmed, is that succession is a relationship, not a transaction. I had treated it as a transfer. I handed Marcus a role and assumed the relationship would manage itself. Relationships do not manage themselves. They require the same deliberate, uncomfortable, consistent attention that I gave to the business in its first decade and stopped giving to the human architecture around it when the business became stable enough that I thought I could afford to. Richard Holt would have made us have the conversation years earlier. He was the mirror for both of us. Without him, neither of us had been looking clearly. Eleanor, when I told her all of this, said, "You always learn the expensive lessons." I said, "The cheap ones don't stick." She said, "No. I suppose they don't." My name is Gerald Whitmore. I am 68 years old. I stood in a room of 200 people while a man I had given everything to tried to retire me with applause, and I let him finish his speech. And then I walked to the front and I said one number. Not because the number was revenge. Because the number was the truth. And the truth, stated plainly and without performance, is always the most powerful thing in any room. There is an oak tree in the courtyard of 4400 Meridian Drive. Richard Holt planted it in 1996. It is 30 years old. It is the first thing you see when you pull into the parking lot. Marcus asked me about it once, early on. He asked what it was planted for. I told him, for the people who would stand under it after we were gone. He nodded like he understood. I think now he might be starting to. This has been a True Consequences original. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs it today. Subscribe for a new story every week. And drop a comment below. We want to know, what would you have done differently? We read every single one. Until next time.